I have been managing this for 4 months. That is the important thing to understand before I explain what happened in the courtyard. 4 months of management. 4 months of complete, deliberate, highly disciplined management of a situation that, as I will now, finally, be compelled to admit, was never actually under control. Her name is Lena. She works in the hold service quarter in the seamstress's room at the eastern end of the building, where the light is best in the morning. She has been there for 8 months. For the first 4, I barely noticed her. For the second 4, the 4 months in question, I have been noticing her in the specific way that a man notices something he has decided not to think about, which is to say, constantly, involuntarily, and with increasing annoyance at himself. My wolf noticed her first. This is relevant. I want it on record that it was his idea. It was a Tuesday, as I recall, in the middle of the autumn season, when I walked through the eastern corridor, and she was on a ladder, rehanging the heavy tapestry that had been taken down for cleaning, and she had her sleeves rolled up and her dark hair pinned back with what appeared to be a bone needle, and she was arguing, cheerfully and without any particular concern for volume, with the laundry keeper about whether the tapestry should go back at its original height or 18 inches lower for a cleaner visual line. I stopped. My wolf, who had been quiet for 6 years, the patient, waiting quiet of a wolf who has learned not to push too hard on a sore subject, made a sound. Not a howl, not a surge. Something much more embarrassing. A sound of recognition, low and certain, the way you make a sound when you see something you have been looking for without knowing you were looking. I kept walking. I said nothing. I had a meeting with the Border Tithe Council in 20 minutes. That was 4 months ago. What followed was, I think, a reasonable and dignified attempt to manage an unexpected development. I increased the frequency of my Eastern Corridor route. I decreased it when I noticed I had increased it. I asked the hold steward a general question about the service quarter's staffing, and then immediately regretted asking because the hold steward is a man who notices things, and I did not want him to notice this particular thing. Lena herself was not helpful. Most people in a hold adjust when the alpha king is nearby. They straighten. They become slightly more formal. They develop a specific quality of awareness that is not quite fear but is cousin to it. Lena did not do this. She did not do this on the Tuesday of the tapestry when I walked past and she didn't look down from the ladder. She did not do this 3 weeks later when I walked through the service quarter on an inspection, and she looked up from a cloak she was mending and said, "The collar seam on what you're wearing is going to fail in about a week. Do you want me to fix it before or after it fails?" I looked at her for a moment. "After," I said, which was not what I meant to say. "That's not more efficient," she said, and went back to the cloak. She mended it the following morning before I had decided what to do about this exchange, because she had apparently asked the hold steward when my schedule had a gap and simply appeared in the outer hall with her kit. The collar seam took her 4 minutes. She did not comment on the fact that I had said after and she had come before. She said, "The lining's good, whoever did it last knew what they were doing," and then she left. My wolf was unbearable about this for the rest of the day. This is the context you need for what happened with Breck. Breck is the alpha of the Nordholm settlement, 3 days' ride north. He is large, direct, and has the specific quality of confidence that comes from being the most significant person in a room for most of your life. He arrived with his delegation on a Thursday for the seasonal alliance discussions. I have had these discussions with Nordholm every season for 6 years without incident. He saw Lena in the main courtyard on the morning of his second day. She was crossing from the service quarter to the hold storage building with a bolt of winter wool over one shoulder, because the delivery had apparently arrived early, and she was the only person immediately available to shift it. She had her hair down, which she doesn't always, and she was walking with the particular efficiency of someone who has somewhere to be and a bolt of wool to get there. Breck watched her cross the courtyard. Then he turned to one of his delegation and said something. Then he walked after her. I was at the far end of the courtyard, in discussion with my border tithe council member about a boundary marker question. I was paying attention to the boundary marker question. I was not watching Lena cross the courtyard with a bolt of wool. My wolf was watching. I became aware of Breck's approach of Lena approximately 30 seconds before I should have become aware of it, which tells you something about the quality of my attention that morning. By the time I processed what I was seeing, Breck, in full Nordholm regalia, stopping in the path of a holed seamstress carrying winter wool, and saying something that made her stop and look up at him. I had already begun walking in that direction. I am not entirely sure when I stopped being in the boundary marker discussion. I hope I said something that sounded like a conclusion. Breck said as I came within earshot, "You're a seamstress." Lena said, "Currently I'm a wool carrier, but yes." Breck smiled. He was, I will say, perfectly mannerly. He is not a bad sort of alpha, he said. "My hold has been looking for senior seamstress. The compensation is good, the position's permanent, you'd have your own workroom." He looked at her with the expression of a man who has seen something he likes and has decided the direct approach is most efficient. "And I'd like to get to know you if you're willing." He reached for her hand. What happened next is somewhat difficult to narrate with the precision I prefer, because the sequence of events covered approximately 4 seconds, and my recollection of them has a quality of simultaneity that doesn't render neatly into chronological order. What I can report is the following. My wolf, who had been managing himself with increasing difficulty for 4 months, and had just watched a northern alpha reach for the hand of the woman he had known was ours since a Tuesday in autumn, stopped managing himself. The mate mark on my wrist, which had been cold for 6 years and warm for 4 months and very warm for the past 48 hours, blazed. I was between Breck and Lena before I had consciously decided to move. The courtyard went very quiet. Breck looked at me. He looked at my wrist. He looked at the space between me and Lena, which was considerably smaller than it had been 30 seconds ago. He is, as I said, a reasonable alpha, and he read the situation with the speed of someone who has navigated pack politics for a long time. He said. "Yes," I said. My voice was, I will be honest, not entirely the voice I normally use for diplomatic discussions with allied alphas. It was the other voice, the one I generally reserve for border disputes that have gone past the negotiation phase. Lena beside me said, "Hello." She was looking at my wrist. I looked at my wrist. The mate mark was gold and unmistakable, visible from across the courtyard, blazing with the specific bright certainty of something that has been warm for 4 months and has finally stopped being patient. My wolf was not embarrassed about this at all. My wolf felt, if anything, that this had taken long enough. I had approximately 30 people watching me, my border tithe council member, Breck's delegation, half the hold service quarter who had apparently followed the general commotion, the hold steward, who was going to be insufferable about this, and a bolt of winter wool lying on the courtyard stones where Lena had set it down. I looked at Breck. He held up both hands in a gesture of genuine cordiality. "My apologies," he said. "I didn't know, she didn't seem," he stopped. "You might have mentioned," he said, and this was directed at Lena with the tone of a man who has just nearly made an embarrassing error and is processing it. "I didn't know either," Lena said, in the serene tone of someone who has been waiting for events to arrive at a specific point and is now watching them arrive. "Not officially." She looked at me. Her expression had the quality it always had, direct, unperformed, with the slight warmth behind it that I had been noticing for 4 months and deliberately not thinking about. She was waiting for me to say something. I was, in that moment, acutely aware of the 30 people watching me. I was aware of my border tithe council member, who would tell this story for years. I was aware of Breck's delegation, who would carry the account back to Nordholm. I was aware of the hold steward, whose expression of carefully suppressed satisfaction told me he had seen this coming considerably before I had. I was aware that my wolf was done waiting, and that the mate mark was going to remain visible for as long as I declined to say what needed to be said, and that there was no longer any management available to me. This was, I acknowledged, a situation I had made by not saying the thing 4 months ago. "Lena," I said. "Yes," she said. "I owe you an explanation." "You owe me several," she said. "But I'll take one for now." Something in the courtyard shifted the quality of the silence, which had been the held-breath silence of people watching something unexpected, became the different silence of people watching something that has finally happened. I said, "My wolf has known you were his since October. I've been managing that." "Managing it," she repeated. "Poorly," I said. "Yes," she said, "I noticed." There was a pause. Around us, the courtyard remained very quiet. Breck, to his considerable credit, had taken 3 steps back and was examining the sky with the expression of a man who has decided this conversation is none of his business. "The mate mark has been warm since October," I said. "It's been warm enough to be visible since about 6 weeks ago." The word I would use is managing, but I understand that's not the most accurate framing. "Ignoring," she suggested. "Managing," I said, with what remained of my dignity. "The hold steward bet it would be before the winter trading season," she said. "I told him he was being optimistic." I looked at the hold steward. He had the expression of a man thinking about who he owed money to. "You were running a betting pool," I said. "The hold was running a betting pool," Lena said. "I just heard about it. I didn't participate. It felt like bad manners." I looked at the courtyard around me. I looked at my border tithe council member, who was looking at the middle distance with the air of a man composing a story to tell his family. I looked at Breck, who was still studying the sky. I looked at the hold steward, whose expression of suppressed satisfaction had reached new heights. I looked at Lena. "I should have said something in October," I said. "Yes," she said. I stopped, started again. I didn't know how to begin. "You could have begun with the collar seam," she said. "When I fixed it, that would have been a reasonable moment." "I said after," I said. "You did," she said. "And then I came before because I'd already decided I would. And you watched me fix it and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer." I had not thought of it that way. I thought about it now, standing in the middle of a very quiet courtyard with my mate mark blazing and 30 witnesses, and a bolt of winter wool on the ground. "I'm going to say something now," I said. "I know," she said. "I've been waiting." Lena, her name plain in my own voice, without the careful management that had been sitting between me and the truth for 4 months. My wolf, present in every word, as present as he had ever been. "You are my fated mate. My wolf has known it since October. I have known it since October despite my best efforts not to. I should have said so then. I'm saying it now, in front of," I looked at the courtyard, "a considerable number of witnesses, because apparently I am incapable of doing this quietly." A breath. "I'm asking you to be my Luna," I said, "if you'll have me. With the understanding that I am fully aware I have handled the last 4 months in a way that left something to be desired." "Something," she said. "Several things," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, the same clear, direct look she had given me from the top of a ladder in October, and every day since, the look that had never once adjusted itself for the fact that I was the Alpha King and she was the seamstress in the Eastern workroom. The look that had been, if I was honest, one of the things that had undone me. Then she said, "Yes." The courtyard exhaled. My wolf, who had been in a state of sustained vindication since the moment Breck reached for her hand, went from vindicated to purely, simply happy. The specific happiness of something that has been waiting a very long time and has finally arrived somewhere it recognizes. I picked up the bolt of winter wool from the ground. I held it out to her. It was the most dignified gesture available to me at the time. She took it, and something moved in her face that was not quite a smile, and was not quite not a smile. "Thank you," she said. "The pleasure is mine," I said. And then, because there was a crowd in Breck's delegation and the hold steward all watching, "Breck, my apologies for the disruption to the morning's discussions." Breck turned back from the sky with the expression of a man who has thoroughly enjoyed watching something he had no part in and has no intention of pretending otherwise. "Not at all," he said. He looked at Lena. "Congratulations." "Thank you," she said. "He's been," Breck began. "I know," she said. He laughed. He was, as I said, a reasonable alpha. The delegation from Nordholm departed the following morning, the alliance discussions having been completed with efficiency that I attributed partly to genuine mutual interest and partly to Breck's continued amusement at my expense. He shook my hand at the gate and said, "You should have said something in October," and I said, "I'm aware," and he left still laughing. The hold steward settled the betting pool that afternoon. I declined to ask who won. I had a reasonable sense of who won. Lena's work moved from the Eastern seamstress's room to the rooms adjacent to the Alpha's chamber 3 days later, at her request. She said she preferred morning light, and the Western rooms had better morning light, which was true, and also that the Eastern corridor had developed a quality of self-consciousness that she found distracting, which was my fault, and which I acknowledged. The senior seamstress who had been in the Western rooms was given a more senior position, and seemed genuinely pleased about it. This was, as arrangements went, efficient. I found, over the weeks that followed, that the hold was different when I stopped managing what I felt in it. Not louder, not more complicated. Different in the way a room is different when something that was wrong about it is corrected, and you realize the wrongness had been there so long you'd stopped noticing it. I worked on my council business at the hall table in the evenings, and she worked on whatever commission she had taken on. She didn't stop taking commissions. She said idle hands were a waste of good training, and I wasn't going to argue with her about it. And the fire burned and the wolves settled, and the hold had the quality I now understood it had been missing. One evening, approximately 3 weeks after the courtyard, she said without looking up from a hem, "You knew in October." "My wolf knew in October," I said. "I caught up somewhat later." "How much later?" "That's not, I don't know precisely." "Roughly." I looked at the document I was reviewing. "November," I said, "approximately." She looked up. "November." "There was a morning," I said, "where you were in the great hall, rearranging the wolfskin hangings because you said they'd been hung with the pile going the wrong direction and were collecting dust incorrectly, and you were explaining this to the hall keeper with the same tone you use for everything, and I watched you for a while." "How long is a while?" "Long enough," I said, "that the document I was supposed to be reviewing had been in my hands for approximately 20 minutes with no progress made." She looked at me for a moment. The warmth that lived behind her eyes, that had always been there since the latter in October, was visible in a way it sometimes wasn't when she was working. "And you still didn't say anything," she said. "I went back to my document," I said. "It was a very important document." She went back to her hem. "You know," she said, "the hold steward said he knew by September." I set the document down. "September. He said you started taking the Eastern Corridor route more often and then abruptly stopped, and that was the giveaway." She was smiling now, in the way she smiled when she was finding something genuinely funny and wasn't trying to hide it. "He said the stopping was more informative than the starting." I thought about this. I thought about the 7 or 8 morning walks I had taken through the Eastern Corridor, and then the subsequent 7 or 8 mornings where I had gone out of my way to use the Western route, which adds 4 minutes to the journey to the tithe office. "I see," I said. "He's very observant," she said. I'll speak to him about it, I said. Please don't, she said. He's delighted. It would be unkind to take that away from him. I looked at her. She was working on the hem again, the fine needle moving with the quick economy I had watched from the eastern corridor for 4 months and from considerably closer for 3 weeks. She had the bone needle in her hair again, the one from the tapestry ladder. Lena, I said. Oh, you knew, didn't you? In October. The needle kept moving for a moment. Then she set the work down and looked at me directly, the way she had looked at me from the beginning, without adjustment. I noticed the bond, she said. I didn't know what it meant exactly. The bond lore isn't something I grew up with in the outer settlement. But I noticed something, yes. And you waited, I said. I waited, she said. You needed to work it out. Some things you can't push. I thought about the 4 months of management. The routes changed, the documents unread, the collar seam mended in 4 minutes, the Tuesday on the ladder, and of all the things I had been working out, and of the fact that she had known and had been patient, and had waited for me to arrive at a truth she had been holding since October. Thank you, I said. I knew you'd get there, she said. You're not actually as bad at this as you think you are. I said, when you offered to fix the collar. You also came to the outer hall the next morning and watched me fix it without saying a word, which was, in its own way, quite expressive. I had not considered this. I thought about it now. Perhaps, I said. She picked up her hem again. The fire crackled. My wolf, settled in whatever way he settled, the way he had been 4 months ago when he made the sound of recognition in the eastern corridor, now arrived and certain, was entirely at peace. Outside, the hold's wolves were quiet in the way they were quiet when things were right. At the morning ceremony 3 days later, before the full hold, council members, senior wolves, service quarter, the hold steward with the expression of a man attending the conclusion of a long-running personal project. I named Lena my Luna and set the marks of claiming in the old pack manner, and the hold bowed. Lena beside me was composed in the way she was always composed, without performance, without adjustment. She had made her own gown for the occasion, which no one had asked her to do and which she had done anyway, because she said she wasn't going to stand in front of the pack in something someone else had sewn when she was perfectly capable. It was gray-blue, warm-weighted, beautifully made. She had the bone needle in her hair. The hold steward was in the front row. His expression, at the conclusion of the ceremony, was the expression of a man who has been right about something for a very long time. I decided not to speak to him about it. Afterward, in the quiet of the hall with the morning light coming in long and golden, she sat at the council table with a commission she was finishing. A winter cloak for one of the senior council members, who had apparently asked her before the ceremony, and who she saw no reason to keep waiting. And I worked on the seasonal accounts, and the wolves settled around the hearth, and the hold had the quality of a place where the thing that was wrong had been corrected. And the correction had been so right that it was already hard to remember the wrongness. She looked up once and caught me not working on the seasonal accounts. The document, she said. I know, I said. She went back to the cloak. I went back to the accounts. My wolf, warm and entirely certain, did not say anything. He didn't need to. He had known since October. He had simply been patient enough to wait for the rest of me to catch up.